We're in the middle of the third chapter. Sorry, stop. We're in the middle of the second chapter of Bava Metzia. And we've passed through the question of what kind of things, count as found objects we can keep and what kind of things have to be announced. And we've learned about a way you announce them. There's this place in Jerusalem, this stone, where someone stands up and announces he's lost something. And someone who's found something announces he's found something. And someone who's lost comes along and describes what he's lost. And they may be able to match. And the Mishnah is now going to go into a little bit more detail about, okay, how does that match process work? And separately, if it doesn't work and the finder is left holding the lost object for an extended period, and we've said already that he may have to announce this on 3 consecutive foot festivals. So that means basically a whole year plus a week. So the finder may be guarding this object for a whole year. So after looking at the process of matchup, the Mishnah is going to move to looking at, well, what are his responsibilities during that extended period of time when he may be holding the object? And in order to learn these out, we need to go back to a couple of verses that we've already looked at, by the way, in the Parsha of Kitei, 22nd chapter of Deuteronomy. Lo tiret shor achicha or et seo nidachim. You shall not see your brother's ox or sheep going astray. Vehit alamta mahem, and ignore them. Really interesting language, by the way. It says you shall not see and ignore them. But it doesn't say you shall not ignore. And the Mishnah is going to play with that. And then it goes on, Hashev to Shivim la'achicha, you've got to return them to your brother. And if he's not close, then you have to take it into your house. Ve'asafto el toch beitecha. So we got to take it into our house. Ve'hayayimach adrosh achicha oto. And it's going to stay there until drosh achicha oto, until your brother inquires about it. And we'll see, by the way, the Mishnah is going to play with this word inquire, adrosh, because drosh can mean to inquire, to require, to seek, but it can also mean to inquire in a textual or maybe inquisitorial way. We make a drush on a text when we learn something out from it. And when we examine witnesses, that's what we do. We do drush. So the Mishnah is going to play with this expression until your brother inquires about it. Ad drosh achicha. And then it closes v'hashevota lo. You shall return it to him. So the Mishnah will play also on that final command. You shall return it to him. So these 2 Mishnayot, in other words, which we're going to look at, are a bit like a halachic midrash. And sure enough, they are based on the halachic midrash of Sefer Devarim, of Deuteronomy on the Sifrei. So if we look at the Sifrei, we'll find the roots of these Mishnayot. And remember, the halachic midrash in chronological terms will come before the Mishnah. The Mishnah is redacted around the end of the 2nd century, but the halachic midrash is clearly already there. It's already there. So the Mishnah is editing something which is already evident in the midrash. And we see that very clearly in these Mishnayot. So let's jump into the Mishnah. Amar et ha'aveda v'lo amar et simaneha. So he said what was lost, but he couldn't describe its marks. This must refer to, by the way, to the claimant. Must refer to the claimant. He said what was lost, but he couldn't describe its marks. Hareze lo yiten lo. He shouldn't give it to him. So, in other words, in order to claim a lost object, you're taking title over that lost object. You need to demonstrate in some way that it was really yours. If you can't recognize it, and we've already said, by the way, that the category of stuff that has to be announced is stuff that is recognizable and is being sought after. So if someone can't quote the recognizable marks, the distinguishing marks, he can't take title over it. And the Mishnah is going to go further. What if some guy, I mean, there must be fraud in this process. If so, if people are standing up by this stone of claimants and saying, oh yeah, I found, maybe a gold vessel. If it's yours, come and claim it. There must be scope for fraud. So the Mishnah goes on. Haramai, afal pish amaret simaneha, harizelo yitem. He shouldn't give to a fraudster, even if the fraudster does describe the marks. If you're known to be someone who's, well, Ramai is it's actually used, the word is used of the snake, I think, in the garden. If you're someone who's subtle, but subtle in an evil way, I've translated here as fraudster. That's clearly the intent. If you're someone who's known to rip people off by deceiving them, you shouldn't give it to him, even if he does quote all the right signs. And now we're going to quote the verse which we've just learned. Adrosh achicha oto, until your brother inquires about it. And now we'll see what the Mishnah makes of it. Until your brother inquires of it, adrosh achicha, the inquiry of your brother, literally. Drosh achicha, the inquiry of your brother. Well, is that the inquiry your brother makes or the inquiry about your brother? Let's go on in the Mishnah. Until your brother inquires about it, or until the inquiry of your brother, that is to say, until you inquire about your brother, whether he is a fraudster or not. The inquiry is two ways. The brother comes to claim, but the finder has to conduct research, conduct due diligence, if you like, on the claimant. So that's the requirement for claiming. Okay, what if it's in your house for a long time? We said, it's going to be in your house until your brother's inquiry. Anything that works and eats, let it work and eat. That is to say, if you've got something like an ox, and fine, it consumes straw, but it works for its living, it can work and eat. So it's no financial charge on you. But something that doesn't work and does eat, yimacher, should be sold. Remember that the fundamental assumption of the Mishnah is that the owner is going to be liable for the cost of all the food. So let's say you've got something like a chicken. Chicken's a great example. Chicken consumes food. It doesn't produce anything. If it's a male chicken, it doesn't produce anything. So if we're going to charge the owner for the cost of the food of this chicken living in your house for a year, well, the cost of the food might outweigh the value of the chicken. There might be no value left. And the Mishnah continues. It's going to be sold. We're going to quote a verse, Shen Emar. We're going to quote our verse again. Vahashevotolo. You shall return it to him. That's how the verse closes. You shall return it to him. Look how you return it to him. How much money will that be? In other words, you got to take care that you return value. If this is a deteriorating asset in terms of its upkeep, you better sell it fast. And then at least you can return him full value from his lost chicken, rather than having to give him, a year's worth of food bills for a chicken that might not even be worth a year's worth of food bills. So take care of how you give it back. Let's keep going. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Yishtamesh Bahem. Rabbi Tarfon says he can use them. That is to say, he can use the money, or maybe it means he uses the object. Lefichach im avdu chayab ba'achriyota. That is to say, if the money gets lost, he's responsible for it. In other words, Rabbi Tarfon takes the view that the legal status of this finder is a bit like that of a borrower. We're going to learn in the 7th chapter that the borrower is responsible for everything. Hashoel chayav ala kol. If you borrow something, you are responsible for whatever happens to it. And Rabbi Tarfon says, look, this person who's found the object is a bit like an involuntary borrower. And Rabbi Akiva will disagree, by the way. Rabbi Akiva, Omer lo yishtamesh bahen. Rabbi Akiva says, look, he can't use the money. He can't invest it, for example, while he's waiting for the owner to show up. Lefichach im avadu eino chayav ba'achriyuto. He can't use it, and therefore he's not a borrower. And therefore, if it's lost, he's not responsible for it. He's not. But he still has to perform upkeep. If he found scrolls, all books, by the way, in the time of the Mishnah were in the form of a scroll, so they had to be rolled and unrolled. He must read them once every 30 days. Apparently, scrolls would get moldy. Certainly in places without central heating, they'd get moldy if they weren't regularly unrolled and read. So if they're in your house, you've got to unroll them and read them once a month. If he doesn't know how to read, he just unrolls them. He just makes as if reading. He can't learn from the beginning. In other words, he can't say, oh yeah, that's going to be my Torah tutelage book. Because then, well, and someone else shouldn't read with him. I mean, we can't focus on one part of the text and maybe make it deteriorate by pointing to it. All we're doing is rolling and unrolling here. We're not really studying from it. Otherwise, we might abuse the text. So if he found clothing, he's going to shake it out once every 30 days. And he's going to spread it out. But he's going to spread it out for its own good. Not for his own honor. He can't spread it out to show what a rich guy he is. He just spreads it out once a month just to air it, basically. Silver or copper vessels, he uses them to keep them polished, because silver and copper can get a bit blackened, but not but not to wear them out. Clay, zahav, vessels of gold or glass. Now, these don't require maintenance. They're valuable, but they don't deteriorate. So there's no need for him to use them to keep them fresh, so to speak. So he doesn't touch them until Elijah comes. The second reference we've had already in this chapter to Elijah. If he found a sack or a big basket or something that he doesn't generally carry about, he doesn't have to take it. So again, we're going back to the category of things that you don't have to take home. And remember, the verse we looked at had this very odd language. Lo tire, you shouldn't see your brother's ox or sheep, ve'hit alamta mehem, and ignore them. Is it that you're not allowed to ignore, or you must ignore? And Rashi, quoting this Sifrei on this language, he says, the language you shall not see and ignore. Lo tirei oto shetita lem mimenu. You shouldn't see yourself ignoring it. That's really the pshat of the verse. But Rabotenu Amru, our teachers have taught, pa'amim she'ata mit alem. Our rabbis, however, said there are times when you can ignore. Sometimes, if it's below your dignity to, pick up some giant sack in the street that's lost and carried home. If you don't normally run around the street carrying giant sacks, you can afford to ignore it. There are some things, some lost objects, that you do not have to return to their owner.